Hello there, Robert De Nardis here from GEMt International. Thank you for tuning into this month's podcast. Again, we've searched far and wide to bring exciting people to you and interesting topics to the table. People who can think outside the treatment cubicle and make the most of their profession. And hopefully it inspires you, and hopefully you enjoy this month's edition of the GEMt podcast. Hi there guys, Robert De Nardis here from GEMt International, and I'm here today with Harry Lowther, physiotherapist from Perth. We first met probably 2 years ago running a dry needling course in Perth.
We did indeed.
How's the needling going?
It's actually going very well, thanks to you. So, no, it's been very good. We've done the other two courses since as well.
You did level 2 and 3. You came to Sydney, I think.
Did both of them. You know, business expense, may as well do the travel at the same time.
Smart man. He listened to me. All right, Harry. I've got you in today because I believe you are a fly-in, fly-out physio. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. I did it for about 12 months and it was through a group. We ended up working with Rio Tinto on a site up in, very north of Perth. So a very remote role and it was a very enjoyable experience.
All right. Well, I thought our listeners would love to hear more about it because I'm sure we've had several people come through our GEMt program who have been FiFo. Now, is it FiFo or FiFo?
I'm a FiFo.
You're a FiFo?
I'm a FiFo.
Okay.
Now, I don't know. The FiFo, it sounds a little bit too Fifi.
Okay.
Too UK dog
sort
of sounding. So FiFo is the one that I would go for, but I can't say if that's actually correct.
And if you're a FiFo physio and you put the P on the end, does it make you a FiFop?
I'll let your audience decide.
Okay, let's move on. All right. So you're a FiFo physio. Tell me the genesis. How did it? Was that an ambition of yours? Did it fall on your lap? How did it happen?
For me, I was always doing something on the side apart from physio, some startup stuff, which meant I was always looking for opportunities that gave me sort of time back that I could work on other projects.
Yes.
So with the FiFo, it was an opportunity that came up. I think I'd known someone that had done it.
Yes.
So it was sort of in the back of the mind, and then it came up on Seek. The other thing that I was doing actually revolved a lot around being on Seek for a different reason altogether. But I did see it come up, and I thought, that's actually quite interesting. That would work for me because I want to work on this project, and that would give me a week every other week to do so and still get a decent paycheck. So it sort of came about, seeing it on Seek, just put in an application without too much thought. It didn't matter to me if I got it. It was more just out of interest. Yep, that would kind of work, I suppose. Put an application in and then got a call up to get an interview and go ahead, basically.
All right. Well, just like I said to you earlier, I get annoyed when people say to me, Robert, you've been lucky in your profession. I say, no, it's about being professional and being prepared and always on the outlook for opportunities, which is what you've done. So tell me, you talked already about a week on or week off or something. Tell me about the typical roster for a FiFo.
Yeah, so I felt I was quite fortunate again that the roles available were largely 7 and 7 or 8 and 6, which means 7 days on, 7 days off, or 8 days on, 6 days off. So just depending on the contract that was held with a certain mine site, it's a little bit of a lottery. Whatever role's available, you'd go in for it. And I happened to get a 7 and 7, which is sort of the dream role when you're looking or considering it from a work-life balance. I wasn't looking at it from how much holiday can I get, but it was more how much time can I get to work on other things. So the 7 and 7 was sort of the dream. If you can get that, then that's a pretty good result.
And how many hours a day?
So it's minimum 12 hours. So you're really getting up at about 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 or 5 in the morning, and then you'll be going until sort of 5 p.m. at night time. So it is a full day. You really don't have time for anything else on site. So you're not going up there again to read books or play video games or anything like that. You're going to be in the office. You're going to be working for about 12 hours. But to me, it didn't really matter because what else are you going to do? Yeah. It's not like you want to be up there trying to waste time away. It's much better to be busy so that the day is just gone. And once you get into the routine of it, like anything, it just flies by. So having a 12-hour day, some people get a little bit shook by. It's really not an issue. Mm-hmm. If you apply yourself like in anything, it does not matter whatsoever.
All right. So let's talk through a typical fortnight for you then. So they flew you in, and what was the flight time for you?
Flight time was about an hour and a half. So
Okay.
hour and 45.
So that would be the day before you'd start your 7 days on?
You would fly in the day of. So you'd get a morning flight for me. So I would wake up on a Thursday morning about 4 in the morning, get to the airport about 5 for a flight time at about 6:30. Would arrive on site at about 8 o'clock in the morning. Once you arrive on site, there was actually a bus then you had to take into town. So about another hour.
Are you on your own, or you got other therapists with you?
Just on my own. So pretty well with most mine sites, you'll largely be a solo physio. Mm-hmm. So each mine site, you might have someone that's close enough nearby that you might be on the same flight and same bus. But ultimately, the mining groups, they're only ever going to have one physio per site. And so you're largely just doing this solo. But to begin with, you have your team leader with you. So the very first time you're doing it, or the very first couple swings, as they're called, you're not just going up by yourself going, oh, what do I do? Where do I go? There's someone that's just essentially holding your hand, taking you through that process so that when in a couple of weeks' time you're feeling pretty comfortable, then you're going solo. And just like everyone else, you're in your high vis, sleeping a lot of the time during the journey to and the journey fro.
So tell me about the sleeping quarters. Did you have a room to yourself? The donga.
The dongas. So the dongas, they're well known because a lot of people end up bringing up their own pillows to leave. You should eventually get a permanent place to sleep. So when your first few swings, you're going to have room hopping. So you can't leave your bag of goods and all your uniforms. So that's a little bit annoying to begin with. Once the mine site has given you a permanent room, it's almost certainly going to be a donga style room, which is essentially just some temporary housing that they put up, which has actually been there for 20 years.
Okay.
So it's very basic. You have a single bed. So if you're a taller fellow or taller lady, you could be in a little bit of trouble. You might be lucky that you get a double bed. Again, there's nothing overly long, but the double beds are fine. You will get air conditioning. So the mine sites, they're very good at keeping you cool. So at least for me, who doesn't have aircon at home, that was actually a bit of a step up.
Yep.
But other than that, the rooms are very basic. You get your bathroom, you get your toilet shower, and you might have a few extra meters to move around, a little study desk.
Shared facility?
So the room itself, you'll be completely alone by yourself, but you will be within like a complex,
right?
Essentially. At least certainly I was. There are a little bit of different setups depending on the mine site and the town and how old and how new. But ultimately, you'll have your own room, your own space, your own door to lock, all that sort of stuff. And then the shared living quarters, I guess, is more to do with just the food. Okay. So you're going to be around a lot of other people when you're getting your lunches, your dinners, your breakfasts, all of which is buffet style, all of which is, of course, free.
Yep.
So that was definitely a good benefit, is you're no longer paying for your meals for half the year, which is, if you add that up, that's quite a lot of savings on top of whatever you're getting paid.
Did you get your money's worth?
I got more than my money's worth. I was having 2 steaks a night, because you could order a steak or a bit of chicken or sometimes a bit of fish, and they would cook that fresh each night for your dinner. So if you ordered 2 of those bad boys, you might have I, to be honest, was eating both of those, but sometimes if I was, for whatever reason, not as hungry, you take that for lunch the next day as well. So I definitely got money's worth with the food. I would say that the food, you got to go a couple different ways with it. I was trying to maintain some level of healthy there, because if you get caught up eating all the curries, all the sweets, you might find yourself gaining a couple extra kegs on the return home. And I would highly advise against getting into that routine. Sure. Because the last thing you want to do is finish a week away from friends, fam, and then also not be feeling great about your body and your health.
You mentioned kegs. Was there some cold frothies to go down after work as well?
I never did.
No?
No, it was, for me again...
but was it available?
It is available. So you've got the tavern that is attached to the food hall, the food mess, whatever it's called. So you can get beers at night. They'll put a tag on you. So they'll essentially know how many beers that you've ordered. I think you can have a maximum of 2 or 3, something like that. So I think we had, in my entire tenure there, I think I had maybe a beer, maybe 2. Yep. And that was towards really at the end where people are leaving and you're having a sort of a goodbye celebration, dinner, something like that. But otherwise, again, not something that I would avoid I wouldn't advise people to get into the habit of a beer at night.
I'm sure all our listeners would drink responsibly, Harry. I'm sure about that. Not a lot of spare time, I get that. But was there gym facilities?
Gym facilities as well. So again, people, it's either you go in the morning, so you're waking up at 3 or 4, a little bit earlier to get the gym session in, or you're finishing work and going straight to the gym, ideally before eating your dinner for the evening. So those are really your only two options. You don't really typically have a gym on the mine site itself. It's really always going to be back in the community mess hall, wherever it is, and probably for good reason. Otherwise, people might be sneaking off hours to do that. How
far was your living facility from the work site?
For me, it will differ a lot, but for where I was at, so I was in Tom Price, and I had 2 sites that I had to go to. One, again, Tom Price itself, and the other one, Marandoo. So my drive, so I had my own car. Not everyone will have that as well. Some people will just be, you get on a bus, you get dropped off in. But we had our own car because we had to split between sites. So to the Tom Price, it was about a 10-minute drive, very short. To Marandoo site, you're looking at somewhere between 50 minutes to an hour.
So tell us now about your clinical day. What sort of facilities did you have? I know you bought and we imported some of our needles for you, but how did they deck you out for equipment? Did you have a quality high-low couch? Did you have any electro equipment that you wanted? How'd they look after you in that respect?
So equipment-wise, they are going to... It's pretty... How would I say? You're not going to be decked out to the halls. You're not going to be able to get the best, most modern equipment. You're pretty much usually going to be stuck with what you're stuck with. The high-low table that we had, for instance, in both sites, I mean, they were fairly old, but they did the job. You know, they worked and they were functional. In terms of equipment, you could order through, I guess, like an officer, someone that sort of controls the supply, and you just put in a request essentially for everything you think you need as a therapist to help people on site. And if you can justify that, then look, you can always request. They might deny. I ended up putting in a request that was probably on the order of $6,000+, which I didn't know at the time, but is well above what people should be requesting. So it wasn't exactly intentional. I just listed all the things I would like to have as a therapist to help my patients, and they approved it. I got a little bit of backlash from my company about that, but again, if you don't ask, you don't receive. So,
but future physios can access that.
Exactly, you can. So you'll normally talk to your team leader. I guess I might have the habit of just going ahead with things at times. So look, you can always chat with your team leader, but you just put up a request. You talk with your officer. They'll put it in. If they deny it, they deny it. And that's all fine.
And what about clinical support? So I think you're 4 or 5 years out as a physio, so you're fairly well established. But what about clinical support? You have senior physios and doctors around you?
On site, you're pretty limited. So they do have a PD day, a personal or professional development day every Friday when you return back home. So even though it's a 7 and 7, you're kind of really doing an 8 and 6 because you are going into work one day when you return back on your swing off. And so through that, they're then doing a professional development. So they'll bring in someone for an hour and a half or 2 hours. So you are actually getting quite a bit of professional development in, which is very handy. The time that you're on site itself, you are a little bit limited, but you've got your team leader and people that you can call at any point. If you've got questions, concerns, you want to run through a case, you've also got other people on sites around you at the same time. So you can ring up your fellow physios across the other site and discuss cases. So there is some availability for that.
Okay.
And they did actually provide, I think it was at the time about $1,000 or $1,500 to help with courses or things you want to do outside, which again, ended up coming to GEMt for that one. That was actually the Sydney crossover, so thanks for that one.
Love it. Lost my train of thought there. I was going to ask you about the demographic of the type of the client. I've never worked in a mine. I'm picturing a male-dominated world. Am I accurate or not?
You are, but it's less so than what it was. So now there are just a lot more women on site in all different roles. So if you'd gone back even 10 years ago, you would be predominantly, if not only, males.
Yes.
Now you do have a relatively, there is a mix in there now, somewhere between maybe 10% to 20%
Good.
of workers are now moving to as women. So yeah, there is a bit of that. The age-wise, it does differ quite a lot. In terms of the clients that I would see or patients that I would see at the time, you are going to tend to get, it is a bit of a mixed bag, but I would say probably the 35 plus demographic you're going to see a little bit more of from at least when you've got someone coming in with an issue from work. The younger gen or the younger peeps you're normally getting as a result of they've injured themselves at the gym or from they play touch rugby or some other injury like that.
Okay. And the physios, how often did you catch up with the other physios in your similar role, and what was their age group?
So on site, we would do a Teams call once a week for like an hour, and sometimes that would go ahead, sometimes it wouldn't. When we're back again every Friday, that sort of PD catch up, everyone's coming together. So you're meeting up with everyone else on site, learning from each other about what their issues are, what's going on, how they've dealt with superintendents or people above that might be difficult, and all those sort of issues. They try and get sort of aired as much as possible because you're going to run into the same types of situations. So that was, again, pretty good. In terms of, again, demographic of the practitioners themselves, we were all largely a year or two out minimum. We've had largely some musculoskeletal history. Like you've done a little bit of that in the past. And everyone probably from about 24 to about 34, somewhere in that region. There's pretty much everyone.
Okay. You talked about the roster, 7, either 8 and 6 or 7 and 7. So I'm guessing you know when you're working well in advance.
Yep.
Any flexibility? You got a wedding to attend. Can you flip it?
Yes, you definitely want to let your team leader know very early on, so that the person that's going to cover you is going to be your team leader. So if you've got a wedding, something that's like a really big event, they'll be pretty good at trying to cover you. And sometimes they can bring in an outside person. If it's a mate's birthday you'd like to go to, you're probably not going to get someone to cover you for that. But big events, not too bad with the flexibility, I would say. Okay.
All right. Well, I was going to ask you about the advantages and disadvantages, and you've pretty much covered a lot of that from what I can gather, and you can fill in the gaps. Sounds like a great role for possibly a single person, if I'm allowed to say that in today's modern world.
I think you are.
Yeah. I can imagine a single person quite demanding physically, obviously, and mentally you've got to get your head around it as well. Long days. A lot of autonomy by the sounds of things with adequate support.
Yep.
Not necessarily posh facilities, so learning to perhaps rough it a little bit and be able to provide your craft under not necessarily the perfect conditions and having to ad-lib. I need to ask, you're sitting here wearing a Tag watch and a Ralph Lauren polo shirt. I may have exaggerated that. I'm thinking the listeners would like to know, how does the pay scale work out? You're working 7/12s are a lot of hours in a 7-day week.
So yeah, if you break down the pay per hour, you might find yourself marginally or slightly disappointed. If you work out the pay in terms of what you're just receiving within the year versus, and plus the amount of time off and the other benefits, you're doing very well in comparison to the bulk of most physio roles.
Yep.
So the pay is definitely probably, I'd say, number one reason why people do the role.
Okay.
Second to that would be the lifestyle and the intermix of those two, where you get essentially 26 weeks off a year where you're not having to be at an office or working, and plus you're getting paid pretty well to do so. That's what the bulk of every physio that I worked with, that's why they were there.
So it's something you probably do for a short time?
I would say if you're young and single, I would say, and depending on what your goals are, 2 years is pretty reasonable, where if you're just putting your head down, don't spend your money, save it for whatever you're trying to achieve and go for. You can save a lot during that period.
Sure.
And you can gain a lot from it as well. The only thing I didn't like long term was occupational physio wasn't as interesting to me, and that takes up 50% of your work.
Yep.
Whereas the other 50 is your hands-on, your musculoskeletal. Much preferred that. So again, long term, if you start to fall out of love with it, that'll also start to make the process maybe a bit harder. But look after yourself, save your money, and I think you'll find it a very good experience.
But you weren't suggesting for a second that a long-distance relationship would struggle on this roster?
Depends on the people, I would say. So, look, again, I was single during my tenure, so
Yes.
it made life very, very simple. But there are people that do it who've got wives and kids, and so it's not impossible, but I can imagine that, depending on the people.
Hang out for our next podcast, which will be on counselling and marriage support and everything in between. Harry, I want to thank you for your time today. You've given us a really good understanding of FiFo, which I think originally stood for first in, first out from an infantry point of view.
Right.
But this is fly in, fly out. And Rio Tinto sounds like they looked after you reasonably well.
Yep.
Great by the sounds of things. A young physio perhaps could certainly cope with the lifestyle and the skill set required. Lots of advantages and obviously can help set you up financially as well if you can put up with the conditions for a year or two.
Yep.
Harry, I want to thank you for your time today. And also the major advantage from your point of view was it gave you time to invest in other interests.
Yep. So, thank you for speaking with us. I think it's a great role, so anyone that goes up there, I think will have a good time.
Thank you for your insights. Well, thank you for joining me in listening to our GEMt podcast of the month. I trust you found it insightful and hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed being part of the interview process. Of course, our members get access to all our podcasts and playbacks for absolutely free, plus so many other features on our membership site. So if you'd like to be a member, by all means contact us. Thank you again for being part of GEMt International and supporting us, and I look forward to joining you on our next episode of GEMt Podcast.